Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I am ML Miller, and I got a new microphone and headset, so hopefully the volume and clarity issues are fixed now. I appreciate the feedback from the comments down below. Today I'm going to give a review to Fantasy Island. It's the new Blumhouse film that was released back in February, but it didn't really do well in the box office, so it is now out on Blu-ray, on demand, and digital. I got a copy of it. I wanted to take a look at it because I'm a fan of Fantasy Island. I used to watch the show with my grandparents on Saturday nights when they would let me stay up a little later after The Love Boat. Fantasy Island 2020 is directed by Jeff Wadlow. It was written by Jeff Wadlow, Christopher Roach, and Gillian Jacobs. And it stars Maggie Q, Lucy Hale, Austin Stowell, Jimmy O. Yang, Portia Doubleday, Ryan Henson, Michael Rooker, Harissa Fitz-Henley, Mike Vogel, Kim Coates, and Michael Pena as Mr. Rourke. This is an odd film. It definitely seems to be geared towards the usual younger Blumhouse market where they try to get the teens and the tweens in the theaters, but they're also trying to get that nostalgia factor going for people, I guess, about my age who grew up watching Fantasy Island. The thing is, in trying to get that youth market, as well as pleasing those older people that might feel a little bit of nostalgia for Fantasy Island, don't think they're going to be successful at either one of them here. The younger kids aren't going to even know what Fantasy Island is, and those who do know about it, they're not going to see a lot that's recognizable here other than a familiar name or two. This might be the reason the film tanked at the box office, and I really wasn't compelled to go see it in the theaters, but I was mildly curious about it, mainly because I like some of the cast, and I had that affinity for the old show. So I'm checking it out here now that it's available on Blu-ray. Let's do a synopsis. A group of adventure seekers exit a plane to claim a prize all of them have won to have their fantasies brought to life on Fantasy Island. Their host, Mr. Rourke, played by Michael Pena, informs them that each of them will have their fantasies made real, and that once they begin their fantasy, they have to see it through to completion. The group expects holograms, hallucinogens, and cosplay, but they're astounded when they find that their fantasies are magically made flesh and blood. Each of their groups see their deepest desires come to life, and then it begins to morph into their worst nightmares. The only key to survival lies deep within the island in a fountain of black water, but Rourke and his crew will stop at nothing to keep them from escaping their chosen fates. Right off the bat, I want to address the biggest problem with Fantasy Island, and it's that Michael Pena just isn't suited for this role as Mr. Rourke. I love Michael Pena. I think he's a fantastic actor. I think he's an amazing comedic relief. He often plays the sidekick character, but I've also seen him play some amazing dramatic roles. While I understand that he might have taken this role to go against type, he's just not very convincing as Mr. Rourke. And there were times when it looks like he's about to burst into laughter when he's delivering his lines. Other times it just feels like he's just not there, like he took the role just for a vacation in Fiji. He doesn't have any type of charm or compassion or commanding presence that Ricardo Montalban exuded every time he stepped out of the cabana and greeted the guests. I just didn't feel it with Pena. It just didn't work for me. I did hear a rumor that Blumhouse wanted Nick Cage to play the role, but he turned it down. First and foremost, I'm pretty shocked that Cage actually turned down an acting gig, given what he's been doing over the last couple of years, barring Mandy and A Color Out of Space and Mom and Dad. But personally, I think someone like Antonio Banderas or Javier Bardem would have been a much more effective and commanding and threatening Mr. Rourke. What we got is someone who, in a less sensitive age, Pena would have been shrunken down via CGI to be Tattoo. And speaking of Tattoo, surely they wouldn't leave out the most iconic character from the Fantasy Island TV show. With all the little person actors out there today, surely they would give a prominent role in a major motion picture release to one of them, right? Nope. Tattoo isn't anywhere to be found when we begin our tale. And when he supposedly does show up towards the end, he bears very little resemblance to the iconic Hervé Villechaize. They did say de plane in this film, but if you didn't know it was a catchphrase, it definitely wasn't made iconic. It kind of was just placed in there as a line, and nothing really made it seem special. I understand it might have been problematic to do this character, but to completely exclude such a vital character is like making Sherlock Holmes without Watson. The thing is, up to a point, Fantasy Island does feel like a typical episode of the original series. Each of the group is introduced, they go off on their own adventure, their fantasies come true, and it manages to teach them a life lesson. Eventually, that lesson does come back to haunt them, and that occasionally occurred in the TV show. The problem is that the film knocks its own legs out from under it by trying to weave all of the fantasies together into one twisted tapestry. After a varied and decently staged set of scenes of jungle action, a siege by a drug cartel, a conflict between a bully and her prey, and there's even some strong relationship drama between a woman who turned down a chance at marriage and now has a second chance to do that. All of those were decent stories, and I was invested in most of them. But when they tried to connect all of the plot threads together, the whole foundation of the film just kind of shatters because they have to have one expositional drop after another in order to make it all fit and work right. And while the complex connections between the fantasies make sense in a way, the amount of jaw-flapping needed to over-explain it for the cheap seats in the audience is tedious and skids any momentum the film has to an abrupt halt. Even if you put the miscasting aside, had this film played out like a typical Fantasy Island episode, keeping the mystery and wonder to separate stories in a sort of anthology format, I think it might have worked, and it might have surprised some folks. By the hour mark, I was wondering why people were so down on this film. The film leaps between the plots well, it keeps with continuity, it works the pace briskly, each plot line was interesting and unique, the actors portraying them, I was invested in their stories. They were fine actors. I had no problem with any of them. It's always great to see Michael Rooker. Kim Coates is an amazing actor, and I'm glad to see him get some roles. He's looking great. And I think that all of the young cast, they do their parts well. It was sort of losty in a way, but then the second hour starts, and you heard me right, folks. This film is almost 2 hours long. I don't think any horror film should be more than an hour and a half, especially not some breezy remake. I think an hour and a half is fine for getting to know the characters, see them go through some sort of threat, and then come out of that threat. Past an hour and a half, it's not a roller coaster ride, it's an ordeal. Fantasy Island kneecaps any goodwill I had for it in the first half, with all of the unneeded attempts to be clever and unpredictable in the second half. Everything gets convoluted. All the plot points go together. I just didn't care by the end. The first hour was solid, but I think Fantasy Island's biggest flaw is that it's almost unrecognizable compared to the source material. And since nostalgia is the only thing it had going for it to make this one work, that makes the whole experience downright unfantastical. So what did you think about Fantasy Island? Let me know in the comments section down below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're